His stomach clenches. The black sedan was gone, but that didn't mean whoever was behind it wasn't still nearby. He glances around, scanning the darkened street, the quiet buildings. How long had they been out in the open like this? Carter steps closer, lowering her voice. Listen to me. I don't know if it's someone inside your department or someone tracking me, but either way, I can't stay here. She hesitates for the briefest moment, then adds, and if I were you, I wouldn't go back to your precinct just yet. His throat goes dry. You think this goes deeper than just a bad traffic stop? She holds his gaze. I think you just got caught in something bigger than you realize. His mind spins. Everything about tonight suddenly feels like a setup, like he was pushed into a moment he never should have been in. And now, standing on this empty street with an FBI agent who is clearly in danger, he has a choice to make. Carter steps back toward her car. I'm leaving, she says, opening the door. You should decide whose side you're on before it's too late. The officer watches her, his heart pounding. Everything in him tells him to walk away, to let her go and pretend this night never happened. But deep down he knows. This is far from over. The officer stands frozen as Agent Carter gets into the car. His mind is racing, trying to process everything that just happened. Just minutes ago, he thought this was just another traffic stop, one that had already gone wrong in ways he never anticipated. But now it feels like something much bigger, something he was never meant to be part of. Carter starts her engine, but doesn't pull away just yet. Instead, she looks at him through the open window, as if waiting to see what he'll do. He knows she's giving him a choice: walk away, pretend this night never happened, or step into something unknown, something dangerous. The radio crackles again. Unit 47, respond, status check. His fingers hover over the radio, but he doesn't press the button. Instead, he looks back at Carter. If I don't go back to the precinct, where do I go? A small flicker of something, approval, maybe, crosses her face. Somewhere safe, lay low, and don't trust just anyone. She shifts the car into drive, but just before she pulls off, she adds, and officer, be careful who you call for help. If they wanted me stopped, they might want you silenced too. Then, without another word, she drives off into the night, leaving him standing there in the eerie silence. He exhales slowly, his hands shaking just slightly. Everything inside him screams to report this, to follow protocol, to tell himself this isn't his problem. But deep down, he knows that's not true anymore. Whoever was watching Carter, whoever set this up, saw him too. He's already involved, whether he likes it or not. Finally, he reaches for his radio, pressing the button carefully. Dispatch, this is Unit 47, he says, keeping his voice steady. Traffic stop concluded. All clear. He releases the button, waiting. A few seconds later, the response comes through. Copy that, Unit 47. Return to the station when ready. The words send a shiver down his spine. There's nothing strange about the message itself, but now, after everything Carter just told him, it feels different. Was it a routine check-in, or something else? Was someone on the inside waiting for him to come back? He looks down the empty street where Carter disappeared, then back at his cruiser. He knows he has a decision to make. Go back and pretend nothing happened, or trust his instincts and find out the truth. With one last glance toward the precinct in the distance, he steps away from his cruiser and into the shadows. Because tonight, for the first time, he's not sure who he can trust. And if Carter was right, trust might be the most dangerous thing of all. The officer grips the radio tighter than necessary, his pulse quickening as he hears the confirmation. The car is clean. The registration is legitimate. And worse, she really is an FBI agent. He swallows hard, glancing in his side mirror at the woman standing calmly by her vehicle. She hasn't moved, hasn't raised her voice, hasn't made a single aggressive move. But somehow, he feels more on edge than ever. He pushes open the door and steps out, forcing his expression to remain neutral. Everything checks out, he says, trying to sound casual, as if this is just another routine stop. She doesn't react at first, just watches him with the same unreadable look. Then she nods. "I know," she says simply. That response unsettles him, because she does know. She knew the moment he pulled her over that this stop wasn't about a traffic violation. She reaches into her pocket again, this time pulling out her phone. He stiffens. "What are you doing?" "Making the call," she replies, swiping her screen. Standard procedure when an officer oversteps. His jaw clenches. He should walk away. He should just let her go. But his pride, his authority, something in him won't let this end so easily. "Look, Agent," he glances at her badge again. "Agent Carter. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot." "Did we?" she asks, tilting her head slightly. "Or did you get caught doing something you shouldn't have?" His face flushes. He's worked hard in this department, built a reputation as someone who gets the job done. He doesn't see himself as one of those officers, the kind that makes headlines for all the wrong reasons. But right now, standing under the streetlights with her unblinking gaze on him, he realizes how this looks. And maybe worse, he realizes how it feels. "You fit a description," he says suddenly, as if grasping at an excuse. She exhales through her nose, just the slightest shake of her head. "That's convenient," she says. "Mind telling me what description that was?" He hesitates. He could say anything. He could make something up. But they both know the truth. There was no description, no report, no real reason to stop her at all. She studies him for a moment, then speaks again, her voice softer this time. "I deal with threats every day, officer. Real ones. I don't have time for this kind of thing." She gestures between them, as if to emphasize the absurdity of the situation. "You need to ask yourself why this happened tonight, because if you don't, someone else will." Her words hit harder than he expects. He glances around, suddenly hyper-aware of the quiet street, the weight of his own decisions pressing down on him. And for the first time tonight, he wonders who exactly is in control here. The silence between them stretches, thick with unspoken words. The officer shifts on his feet, suddenly feeling the weight of his badge in a way he never has before. His training taught him to stay in control of every situation, but right now, it feels like he's the one being evaluated. Agent Carter doesn't look away, doesn't blink. She's waiting for his next move, but he has no idea what the right move even is. The streetlight above them flickers slightly, casting long shadows across the pavement. His radio crackles softly, but dispatch isn't calling for him. No one is watching. No one is listening. This moment, this decision, is entirely his. "You can go," he says finally, his voice quieter than before. He doesn't meet her eyes. "Just have a good night." Agent Carter doesn't move. "That's it?" she asks. He nods, though something about it feels wrong. Like it's not enough. Like it doesn't erase the fact that this shouldn't have happened in the first place. She watches him for a moment longer, then exhales slowly, slipping her phone back into her pocket. But instead of heading to her car, she takes a step closer. "Let me ask you something," she says, her tone calm but direct. "If I hadn't been who I am, if I were just another black woman driving home, what would have happened?" His throat goes dry. He wants to say it wouldn't have gone any differently, that he would have followed protocol, that he never would have escalated the situation. But even as the words form in his mind, he knows they aren't true. She waits, giving him space to answer. When he doesn't, she nods to herself, as if that silence is answer enough. Then, a new sound cuts through the night, the distant hum of another car approaching. The officer turns his head slightly as a sleek black sedan slows at the corner. The tinted windows make it impossible to see inside, but something about the way it lingers, idling just a little too long, sends a shiver up his spine. The flashing red and blue lights cut through the night as a police cruiser pulls up behind a black SUV. Inside, a woman grips the steering wheel, her heart steady, her expression calm. But she knows exactly how this is about to go. She's been here before. The officer steps out, his boots crunching against the pavement as he approaches the driver's side. His hand hovers near his belt. "License and registration," he says, his tone sharp, almost impatient. The woman, dressed in a crisp blazer, moves slowly, deliberately, reaching for her purse. "Is there a reason you pulled me over, officer?" she asks, keeping her voice measured. "You ran a stop sign," he says quickly, though she knows for a fact she didn't. She exhales, handing him her documents. The officer barely glances at them before his expression hardens. "Step out of the vehicle," he orders. Her eyebrows lift slightly. "Excuse me." "Step out." "Now," he repeats, his hand now resting on his holster. The woman sighs, knowing this is about to escalate. She unclicks her seatbelt and opens the door. The officer's grip on his belt tightens as she slowly steps onto the pavement. He doesn't know who she is. Not yet. "Turn around, hands on the car," he commands. She holds his gaze for a long second before doing as he says. She's been trained for situations like this, but it's different when you're the one being profiled. The officer pats her down roughly, his search quick, almost careless. And then he reaches for the handcuffs. That's when she finally speaks. "Before you do that, you might want to check my badge," she says, her voice cool but firm. The officer hesitates. "Badge?" She turns her head slightly, meeting his eyes. "I'm a federal agent." For a split second, his expression falters. His grip on the cuffs loosens. The tension in the air shifts. The silence stretches between them, thick, charged. And then, his next move will change everything. The officer blinks, his grip on the cuffs loosening just slightly, but his stance remains rigid. His mind races as he processes what she just said. A federal agent. That wasn't what he expected. He looks at her face again, really looks this time, and sees the steady confidence in her eyes. She's not panicked. She's not making excuses. She's waiting. He clears his throat. "Badge," he demands, though there's a slight waver in his voice now. The woman doesn't rush. She knows better than to make any sudden moves. With careful precision, she reaches into her blazer pocket and pulls out her identification. She holds it out, letting him see the unmistakable gold lettering, FBI. His face shifts, confusion first, then something else. Frustration? Embarrassment. He takes the badge, scanning it quickly, his fingers gripping it tighter than necessary. "You should have mentioned this earlier," he mutters. She raises an eyebrow. "And you should have had a reason to stop me in the first place," she replies smoothly. The officer doesn't respond right away. The night air is thick, the sound of distant traffic filling the silence. His grip tightens on the badge before he shoves it back into her hand. "What division?" he asks, as if still trying to find a way to control the situation. "Counter-terrorism," she says, her voice steady. He exhales sharply, glancing at her again, as if seeing her for the first time. Counter-terrorism, that's serious. That's way above his pay grade. She tilts her head slightly. "Do you always cuff people before checking their credentials?" He doesn't answer. Instead, he takes a step back, as if creating distance will somehow fix this. But it won't. Because now there's an undeniable truth between them. He stopped her for a reason that had nothing to do with traffic laws, and they both know it. "I need to run your plates," he says finally, though his voice lacks the same authority it had minutes ago. She watches him carefully. "Go ahead," she says, crossing her arms. "But I'll be making a call of my own while you do." He doesn't like that. His jaw tightens, his fingers twitch near his belt. But he turns and walks back to his cruiser, pulling out his radio. Inside the car, his hands shake slightly as he keys in the plate number. The dispatch response comes almost instantly. "Clean. Registered to the FBI." His stomach tightens. Back outside, the agent watches him, calm but observant. She's seen this before. The moment an officer realizes he made a mistake. But what happens next will tell her everything she needs to know about him. Because now the real test begins. Agent Carter notices it too. Her body tenses just slightly, a shift so small that most people wouldn't catch it. But he does. And in that instant he realizes she's not just concerned about their interaction. She's watching something else entirely. "Everything okay?" he asks, instinct kicking in. She doesn't answer right away. Instead, she watches the car, her eyes narrowing slightly. And then, almost too quietly, she says, "I don't think this stop was random." His stomach drops. The meaning behind her words settles in fast. This isn't over. Not even close. The officer's pulse quickens as he follows Agent Carter's gaze to the black sedan. It still hasn't moved. The low rumble of the engine hums through the quiet street, an eerie presence just sitting there, watching. A normal driver would have passed by now, maybe glanced at the scene before moving along. But this car isn't just passing through, it's waiting. Carter shifts her stance slightly, her body language no longer just calm. Now, it's calculated, alert. The way her fingers hover near her blazer, the subtle tilt of her chin, the way she studies every movement of the vehicle, it tells him she's in full tactical mode. She's not just an FBI agent caught in an uncomfortable traffic stop anymore. She's someone who sees danger before it strikes. The officer clears his throat, trying to keep his voice steady. "You recognize that car?" She doesn't answer right away. Instead, she keeps watching, her sharp eyes scanning every detail. Then finally she murmurs, "Not yet, but I know what to look for." The officer grips his belt tighter. His first instinct is to brush it off. Maybe it's just a coincidence. But something deep in his gut tells him that's not the case. And judging by the way Carter hasn't taken her eyes off the car, she feels the same way. Then, the sedan's headlights flicker. Once, twice, a signal. Carter straightens. "You should get back in your cruiser," she says quietly. The officer hesitates. "Why?" "Because if I'm right," she says, voice low but firm, "whoever's in that car wasn't expecting to see you here." His stomach twists. He doesn't like where this is going. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the black sedan peels away from the curb, tires screeching against the pavement. The officer's instincts kick in. His hand flies to his radio. "Dispatch, I've got a vehicle fleeing the scene, possible." Before he can finish, Carter reaches out and presses a firm hand over his radio. "Don't," she says. His eyes widen. "What?" "Don't call it in," she repeats, her voice steady. "Not yet." The weight in her words is heavy, more than just caution, it's warning. He stares at her, heart pounding. "You want to tell me what's going on?" She exhales, her eyes still locked on the retreating taillights. "I don't think you pulled me over tonight," she says finally. "I think someone wanted me stopped." The words send a chill through him, because now everything feels different. The stop, the tension, the way that Carl waited in the shadows. It wasn't random. And whoever's behind it, they're not done yet. The officer's breath is shallow as he watches the black sedan disappear around the corner. His instincts scream at him to chase, to call it in, to do something. But Agent Carter's grip on his radio is firm. She isn't panicked. She isn't second-guessing. She's thinking, calculating. "You need to trust me," she says, her voice low but steady. Trust her? A part of him resists. This entire night has been a mess. First the traffic stop, then the unsettling realization that he had pulled over an FBI agent, and now this. But there's something about the way she stands there, completely in control, that makes him pause. "Who would want you stopped?" he asks, his voice tight. She exhales, finally lowering her hand from his radio. "I don't know yet," she admits, "but I have a feeling that Carl wasn't just here by chance." She turns, looking at him now. "And if they saw you with me, you might be in this too." A chill rolls down his spine. "In what?" She shakes her head. "I need to get out of here, and so do you." For the first time that night, the officer feels like he's lost control of the situation. But before he can decide what to do next, his radio crackles to life. "Unit 47, what's your status? We've got an anonymous report of suspicious activity at your location." The officer stiffens. "Anonymous report. You didn't call anything in." His hand hovers over the radio. Carter's expression darkens. "Don't respond," she warns. His fingers tighten around the radio. Why not? Because if someone reported us, it means they're still watching.